Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. I am your host as always, Steve Hall, and again I am joined by Mike Israetel from Renaissance Periodization. We've just been talking off air about some exciting things that are happening at RP, but also our usual yearly collab where Mike and plus some other people are coming over to the UK. This time I won't put out who might be coming, but there is going to be more than just Mike this time. And as everyone who's come before absolutely loves it, it's going to be bigger and better every single year. So we're super excited for that. It's probably going to be around May time. So definitely keep your eyes and ears open for it. And if you really want to kind of get the first scoop, then just making sure to follow us on social medias and also sign up to our email list, which will be linked below because we will email out there. So how are you doing, Mike? I know we just spoke and you're also deloading now, as am I.
Yeah, deloading, but I decided to cut the mesocycle at a good time to where I'm not completely wrecked. Just at that sort of like, man, if all my mesos I could cut at this time, it'd be great. Like you basically know that you're getting no more good training sessions out, but all the training sessions so far have been really good. It's like the ideal time to cut it, you know? So I'm doing great, feeling pretty good. And I just dropped body weight from 265 in August. Now I'm down to 245 or so. It was the easiest cut of my entire life because I ate 900 grams of carbs to get up to 265. So as soon as I pulled back to 600, my body was like, blah, I just lost a bunch of weight. A ton of that was fluid, but it was a super easy cut. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to be maintaining maybe a little, like sort of just, eating and training pretty hard over the holidays. And then in January, I start another 9-week cut to get down to, another 10 pounds of fat probably. And that will put me in a cool position to do a maintenance phase through April, May, June. And then in July, I start dieting for what will probably be a contest.
Amazing.
So, So I'm in pretty good shape right now. I got some cool veins and stuff going on. I think at the beginning of March, I'm going to start to look really fucking interesting. And then I'm not going to get much heavier after that, more or less maintain that condition and get a little softer and then come back in the summer and really start to crank things in. I've really got my diet dialed in. Thanks to Broderick, and my supplements dialed in thanks to Broderick big time. So it's really, really smooth sailing, very predictable. When you're, special sports supplements, you're doing it yourself. You have no fucking clue what you're doing. Me for 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of unpredictability where you're like, I should be gaining weight, but I'm not, or I should be losing weight, but I'm not. Now it's like really sort of just set in stone, and that's a really, really good place to be. So.
Yeah, I guess it makes it all that much more complicated when you chuck those in the mix. Like 100%. People get stressed out enough about kind of, menstrual cycles, sodium intake, changing through phases, some soreness rated because you're holding on to it from training, and you've got all of that multiplied by 10.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's super exciting. I guess, more reason for people to come over in May when you're going to be in some gnarly condition.
I guess another good reason is to see you and your fucking arms, man. Every time you make a post, I'm like, what the hell happened to Steve's arms? You've been killing it in training lately, like your deadlifts and stuff, and your squatting is like, oof. I watched that one leg session you did, and I was like, God, thank God I'm not Steve. That looked like a painful session.
They're like the splitting up my leg training into AM and PM sessions has been good, but it's like hard. I'm glad psychologically this deload was quite needed, but thank you. It's going super well, and it's just using the principles, auto-regulating volume, making sure that I'm ticking all the boxes off. That last leg session I did with those squats and that one set of squats, my legs are still very sore, and this is like 3 days afterwards. So
there you go. You seem to be really hitting a stride in the last half year with your training, where I think like you really are transitioning as an athlete from the figuring out what works stage of your career into you've got stuff pretty well figured out for your body. And it's like you've just been making these slow and steady gains for seemingly a while now. It's just really cool to watch.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried for when they might peter out and they don't keep coming. So I'm psychologically
out now. That's right. You've got it all figured out. When you have good times, worry that they're going to be bad. When you have bad times, be pissed that they're bad. That way you're never happy and life success. You're like, that's like the Jared Feather school of psychology right there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can see him being just like that with his heavy
That's
metal
it.
in the background.
That's it.
So yeah, no, and you're completely right. This is kind of, I just feel much more, in a really bro-ish term, connected to my training and an understanding that is now giving me confidence. So I used to have anxiety about whether I was doing the quote unquote optimal thing, the right thing. And it's kind of like, well, there's so much information out there now. Just be confident that you know it and then move forward with it. And I think a lot of our listeners probably benefit from that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I got that some of the first interactions, even not direct, but just reading of stuff that I got sort of from Eric Helms and the 3DMJ crew. When I sort of became a bit more popular in this evidence-based scene, I was correctly seen as someone who was chasing optimality. And a lot of the pushback I got from the 3DMJ crowd was like, if you have something that works well, don't like upset the apple cart by trying to change everything and making it optimal. And at the time I was like, ugh, like that's not a very scientific view of things. It's not the kind of precision we want. And you don't want to have a good career. You want to have a great career. You want all the gains instead of some. But I think there's a great sort of meeting in the middle there where you start from like, if you have no clue what's going on with your training, like you said, you're not connected to your body at all, or to your results. Like you just have there's no predictability. You know, like guys will say, like, I'm sure you're in your Revive Stronger group on Facebook, people will be like, man, last week's training was great and this week's training was awful and I just don't know why. And like, you kind of like read that and you're like, man, like I just wish you the learning of the principles and of your body that you will have few situations like that. Like you and I probably, like when we have a bad week, we know damn well why it's a bad week. It's like a mystery. It's like I can tell you exactly how my next week's going to go based on this one. So I think for the folks that really haven't gotten their training to click yet, that search for optimality is a real bad idea because it's just going to be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. It's not optimal what's going on. It's tons of confusion. I think step one is to get that clicking of like, man, my training's smooth, it's predictable. That's the biggest one. Once that happens, you've got this dashboard of variables, right? Volume, intensity, frequency, nutrition, blah, blah, blah. Then you just start mucking with the dashboard real smooth and real slow, kind of one or two things at a time. And then you see how your progress goes. You retain that flexibility and you start the slow crawl towards optimality, as opposed to being like, I want a fucking clean slate and just have optimal program. It's like, that's really impossible because in order for the program to be optimal, it has to overlay accurately on what your current responses and state is. And if you don't know this, it's like this, you're like, there's nothing to overlay. It's like, what's optimal for you is a fucking wild guess. All we could do is learn the principles. When you're stable, we can start working to optimal. Like someone's like, what training frequency should I use for biceps? And I'm like, my first question is, what's your training frequency now? And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know, it's been spotty. Like I've tried this, I've tried that. And I'm like, okay, try a frequency and just stick to it. And that's when I go general, right? 2 to 4 sessions a week. Just try 2 sessions a week for biceps. And all right. And then I'm like, come back to me in a month or two. In a month or two, they come back and I'm like, how's it been? And they're like, it's been good. I'm like, okay, progress is good. Good. Are you healing on time? Yes. Do you feel like you're exceeding like your intra-session MRV? They're like, yeah, because I'm doing like 15 sets of biceps per session and I'm just getting tired at the end. And I feel like if I split it up more, I could be higher quality. I'm like, perfect. Try 3 times a week. Lower the volume on everything 3 times a week and then start slowly working back up. And then they're like, wow, this is great because they had something that clicked. They knew their recovery. They knew their adaptation. They made one change and then it's a beautiful synthesis after that. Whereas if they're like, I don't really know how many sessions I'm doing, I'm not going to be like, well, start with 4 or some shit or, like just start with what's simple, what's really easy, and then go from there. I think there's a ton of value to that sort of approach.
Yeah, I think people can really understand that, and it's brilliantly stated by yourself in that when you think about diets, people can start off with like meal plans and then they can kind of get to grips with that. Then they might go to tracking and then eventually you might get to kind of that mindful eating where you kind of know what you're doing. You don't really need to worry about things so much. I think it's a very similar transition, but training just doesn't seem to click for people as well.
Totally, yeah. With diet, yeah, that's a really good point. Diet, Steve, is like people are like, I want what's optimal. Or like, okay, well, here's this RP Diet app, and it's going to tell you exactly what to eat for every meal of every single day, and it's going to time it to within 30 minutes. And they try it, and they're like, oh man, that's like too much for me. It's like, I know, I should have told you. you're not ready for optimal. It's like enrolling in like Air Force, like fighter pilot flight school and be like, I want to be the best fighter pilot. It's like, nice. Do you know how to fly a plane? Like, not yet. Like, why don't we just make you a pilot first? Then we can worry about optimal. Right. And a lot of that I think is kind of missed. And with dieting, unfortunately, it happens all the time where people like, especially, fuck, man, this is like super pertinent post. I hope that folks that are watching this, because a lot of your audience is trainers and stuff, I hope they maybe can communicate some of these messages if they find them valuable to their clients, especially this time of year. Folks, January 1st is coming up. Do not start what's optimal. Start what is reasonable and what is simple and will just get you results, just some results. Later, you can make it more optimal. And some people are like, what's the, like, okay, I've got family that are like, they'll just text me out of the blue or call me, and they'll be like, what's the best diet? I'm just like, shut the fuck up. You don't need the best diet. You need a diet, motherfucker. You need like 2 meals a day that don't suck, because you currently have 0 meals a day that don't suck. And it's funny because people think they're kind of being ripped off. You know what I mean? Like, you can walk in, I guess this is also, the analogy still works. I was going to say you can walk into like a technology store and come out with the best computer. So they think, well, why don't I just buy the best diet? The thing is, even the best computer, it's going to be like, well, this is a gaming laptop. And they're like, okay, what does that mean? It means it costs $4,000. And they're like, why the fuck does it cost that much? Well, you got like a fucking, enough RAM to run the fucking supercomputer and to play online games like 3 players at a time. And they're like, great, how does that work? We're like, well, you're not even understand how it works. Like, just get a regular laptop. And then when you get into gaming and your laptop speed slows you down, then you'll know enough to, you know what I mean? So I think it just applies to a lot of stuff, is people want just boom, right into the super advanced. And it's like, just start with the normal. And because that normal isn't just, it's not like people think it's like you have to earn it, like you're not ready for advanced, brother. You got to fucking pay your dues. You're not paying your fucking dues. This isn't an honor-based society. You're learning your own body or your own mind well enough so that you can even choose what's optimal. Because optimal is always the intersection of advanced principles with what your body is going to respond to. If you don't know that part, again, then it's pointless to even apply these because you have no fucking clue. So I think that, like, especially for New Year's resolutioners, they're what's the best diet? Like, what's the diet that's you're going to be looking at it the first time you ever use it, and you're going to look over the documents and be like, yeah, I can do this. That's the diet you need. And then later, when that diet's too easy, when you really got it down, but your results are starting to slow down, then you could incrementally bump the level of advancement.
Mm-hmm. Really nice. Yeah, really pertinent for this time of year, because no doubt there's going to be a load of New Year's resolutioners, which isn't a bad thing, but it's when they don't keep it going, which is the consistency, that adherence part. So sure. We're getting to the questions, and the first question is from Robert Litz, and thank you. He is a Patreon supporter of the podcast, so we appreciate you. He has essentially asked, he understands the use of downsets for hypertrophy. He's heard you kind of really well explain those. He's wondering their application towards strength training or programming. What would we use downsets for?
The same thing they're used for in hypertrophy, which is the addition of volume. So basically, there's kind of ways to do downsets. The traditional thinking of downsets is to lower the weight, do the same number of reps or similar. There's a potential way to do downsets, which is very, not very much practiced, but it is possible to do. Just to outline the theoretical behind downsets, is to drop reps and keep the same weight. When you're too tired to do sets of 6, you do sets of 4 with the same weight. It still adds volume, but at a similar intensity, because you can't hit those same reps anymore. So you basically get into a sort of conundrum with downsets, or with straight volume, with straight sets, where, let's say you have to do, let's say your sort of target workout somewhere between your MEV and MRV in strength training. Let's say your session has 6 sets of squats. Like, that's just what you need to grow, to get stronger. That's how much stimulus you need, right? And you look at strength training, and you sort of look into the literature, and you realize, okay, like for sets of 6, anything shy of like 3 or 4 reps in reserve it just isn't going to cut it. Like that's just not strength training anymore. It's just like a long warm up. Plus, if I have like my 8 RM on the bar and I do 5 RIR, that's 6 sets of 3, but the really easy sets of 3 is just going to take me forever to get through the shit. So, and like there is something to strength for getting a little closer to failure. So I would say the sort of optimal. If you only had to pick one RIR ever to train for strength, it would probably be 2 RIR. It's probably the best. And, 2 or 1, even if you're training heavy enough. So 2 RIR, and you figure, okay, so I got to hit 2 RIR sets in sort of like the 3 to 6 rep range. I got to hit 6 of them shits. Hold up. So you might hit 4 sets like that, and your reps might be like 6, 5, 4, 3 because you get tired. But after, the last 2 sets, you're like, man, either I'm hitting doubles, which just doesn't add that much volume, because, they say the number of hard sets is equivalent.
Sorry. Ignore
that. Phone, you got your side business there. So, you're looking at, you need more volume with that heavy resistance. And if you're just so tired, basically, that you're just doing doubles, I mean, geez, it's just not enough volume. It's not enough time under tension to give your nervous system and your muscles enough stimulus to grow them and to strengthen them optimally. Just plain and simple. It's not enough dose. So you say, okay, how can I give more dose? One option is to do more sets. It's totally possible. But, that'll take you into a repetition range. You're grinding heavy 2s at that point. I mean, you need a lot of sets of 2 to get more volume. And also, it's real fatiguing. I mean, if you're doing sets of 2, I don't know if you're really doing 3 or 2 RIR anymore. You might be doing 1 RIR at that point, which is too fatiguing. So what you could choose to do, and like I said, dropping reps is a possibility. So instead of, let's say you hit a bunch of sets of 5 and then you're too tired to hit sets of 5, so you just do sets of 3 after that. You did 4 sets of 5 and then 2 sets of 3. That's totally possible. Or what you could do is try keep hitting sets of 5, so you drop the weight low enough to where it's still 2 RIR and it's sets of 5, so drop by 10% or something. And the fundamental thing is, can you stick within your RIR boundaries and within your dedicated rep range that you've chosen and to get enough volume to accomplish your volume goals for that phase? If you can, without drop sets, you don't need drop sets. People think there's some kind of magic to drop sets sometimes where they're like, I see guys like do 2 top sets, not very strong guys, like Chad Wesley Smith. It makes sense because 2 of his top sets taken fucking life out of him, right? But like guys who, folks could keep going for like 4 more sets and they just do drop sets anyway. And they're like, okay, your favorite Instagram lifter does drop sets. You're really advanced. These are the same kind of people that like walk a squat out and do the stomp. You ever see the stomp setup where you're like, the fuck are you stopping for? It's like 100 kilos on the bar. Like, stop. But, some of these like down sets, I'm doing down sets. And of course they're going to post on Instagram, talk about down sets. Hey, sometimes you don't need them. There's a bunch of workouts where I didn't need down sets, like probably like anywhere between 3 and 5 for most people, and most times 3 and 5 working sets, you can totally do and stick to a reasonable RIR range, right? After that, yeah, if you got more sets to do, you're going to do down sets. When you think about it, switching exercises is also accomplishing a down set thing. So for example, like if someone's doing squats and then front squats, well, as soon as you do squats for, let's say, 6s and front squats for 8s, your front squat's way lighter load to get 8s. It's another form of down sets to just get more volume, right? So again, it's a real simple calculation of what do I need to do down sets. I have rep targets, RIR targets. If I can no longer meet them at the end of the workout, but I still have my volume targets to meet, I can accomplish this with down sets.
Yeah, really nice. And I think the only different application I've seen used, or I've used personally, I think Jared might have used them as well, is where you might use them as a bit of like, add them on as like a layer of, you've gone through one mesocycle of like 6 to 8s, then you keep maybe a couple of sets of 6 to 8s, you have some down sets that get you into a higher repetition zone. But essentially it's the same sort of, we're just using it to get out some extra volume. It's like undulating the repetition.
Yeah, totally, exactly. At that point, it's like, okay, so I established my strength dosing. I gave myself enough strength sets. Now I need a little bit of hypertrophy conservation sets. And that really just means that your total volume target for the workout is higher, significantly higher, that you can't accomplish it within fatigue realms in sets of 3 to 5. So you got to drop the weight and go to sets of 6 to 8. That's it.
Cool. Awesome. So we get to the next question from David Beamish, who has asked, Often developing habits is a good thing as it automates behavior and frees decision making. But for example, during contest prep, these habits can become neurotic. He says, what are warning signs of these and how can they be tackled?
Warning signs of neuroticism is when you have neuroticism. So a pretty easy way to tell is asking yourself, if you're concerned, what is the exact, finite, specific purpose of this current activity that I am habitually doing, and does its purpose align with my goals in a way that is reasonable, close to optimal, or a good guess, and sustainable? So, for example, if you look both ways before crossing the street, that is a good habit, especially in the UK when cunts drive on the wrong side of the fucking road, isn't it? So it's a good habit, and it's reasonable. Okay, you don't want to die. It's sustainable. It's not difficult for your neck or anything like that, and it's pretty close to optimal if you want to again not die. So it checks all the boxes. Now, what about if you look 5 times both ways before crossing the street? And mind you, that's not 5 times because the traffic situation is changing. That's 5 times when the road is completely open. So you assessed 0 cars up to 500 meters away, 0 cars up to 500 meters away. And again, 5 times. You go back through the checklist. Is it reasonable to look 5 times? No. Is it sustainable? Yeah, sure, at a price, but certainly not, potentially it's just a nuisance. It also makes you fucking look weird and have to explain yourself to people. And, is it optimal? No, it actually gives you no more benefit for only exclusively cost, right? So some of the, the habits you could get into with contest prep, you get in the habit of weighing all of your food. But then you get a packaged food that is very well sorted. Maybe it's even like a fitness food, so it's very well packaged and very well weighed, like a protein scoop. And you weigh your protein scoops. Okay, is it reasonable for me to weigh something that has already been pre-weighed for me? No. Is it optimizing? Yes, by a tiny percentage point. Is it sustainable? No, because it's going to drive me insane if I have to weigh everything all the time. And it literally costs me physical effort and the burdensome psychology of having to go through a routine when I could just be doing things that are relaxing or productive. So it fails on those grounds. And that's actually how it's actually a really good test for sanity, because, being very highly neurotic is a way of being insane. A good test for sanity is, does this make sense for me to be doing? Right? Now, mind you, if you pass your own test for sanity, you might still be insane. Probably the hallmark of being truly insane is that you think you're fine, right? It's so funny because, I've been down my own roads and continue to explore, like psychedelic drugs and stuff, like mushrooms and stuff like that. And it's funny because when you trip with people, they'll look at you and they're like, oh man, I think I'm losing my mind. And I'm like, why do you think you're losing your mind? And because it's just shit doesn't seem right. I'm like, congratulations, you haven't lost your mind. if you think the green elf you're talking to is actually there and you don't see a problem with that, you're nuts, right? So the thing is how do you, so going back to the question, how do you avoid neurotic behaviors? If you suspect that some of your behaviors are generating neurosis, then you analyze if they're logical, if they're defensible, if they're reasonable, if they're sustainable, if they're close to optimal, and you're not just doing them because you're addicted to habits and I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. I've got to weigh myself at 9:59 a.m. every single day. Is it reasonable to do that? Not really. Is it optimal? Not really. Right? Is it sustainable? No, because it's greatly inconvenient. Sometimes you wake up a little earlier, sometimes later, sometimes you have appointments, so on and so forth. So if a behavior fails on those grounds, then it is an improper, unreasonable behavior. It is probably generated by neurotic tendencies, and you should stop doing it. That's it. You don't need to you can if you want. You don't need to give up bodybuilding and run through the fucking Meadowland flowers with Gaia, the Earth Goddess, and shit like that. Like, because people go overboard on that stuff. They're like, oh man, like I was so neurotic about bodybuilding, I quit everything and I started eating like shit, and I feel so much better now. It's like, you could have just reasonably extracted yourself a little bit from neurosis and just been more logical. Like I've totally had times where I'm like, I've got to get 15 sets done today, and like autoregulation tells me I'm not going to do it, and I'm like, why am I? Just stop. Mm-hmm. Because a good way to practice that is to hold logic and reason as your highest absolute values. If you can defend an unreasonable action and you doing it, you got a real serious fucking problem, because then there's nothing you're going to do. There's no backstop. If someone asks you, like, why are you doing that? And you're like, cause, they're like, do you think it's logical to do that? Like, no, but I'm still going to do it. Like, fucking 3 cheers, man. I got nothing more to say to you. How are you supposed to talk someone out of doing something if they're willfully illogical, right? So if you're still logical, you're being neurotic when you're being illogical, and when you're dedicating yourself to completing a behavior which is still habitual but no longer logical. That's it. And if you that way, through this constant filtering mechanism of checking, okay, is this logical, is logical, eventually, you only really do things that are logically defensible. That's it. And then it doesn't matter. Then you're not neurotic because you're doing things that work. And if they're habits and they're logical and they make sense, it's kind of okay to be neurotic. Like, so people say, addiction is really bad. All of us are addicted to food and air and water. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. People say, oh, I'm addicted to training. Like, that's probably a good thing, unless you're going overboard, right? So if you're addicted to training, but illogically when the training gets too hard, you do a deload because you have to, you've got your fucking golden. You won the fucking lottery of psychology. There's way worse shit to be addicted to. So it's totally cool to have behaviors that are very habitual, sort of bordering on addiction, as long as they're good behaviors and they're not illogical. As a matter of fact, man, this is great topic. One of the ways that they define addiction in like the diagnostics manuals for psychiatry is it interfering with your life and the lives of those around you? If it's not, it literally just doesn't qualify. So like people are going to be like, Steve, are you addicted to training? And you'd be like, maybe I sure feel like it. And they'd be like, okay, is training ruining your relationships? You're like, no, it's probably making them better. Like, okay, is training like making you devalue other important parts of your life that you know are important and you know you should attend to? Like, you skip social events that you actually want to be at all the time because you just compulsively go train. You're, skipping out on family and friends. You these foods that you want to eat, you just don't. And even though you really want to eat them, you're not, and you hate it because not because you have a goal of like, I want to be lean, but because you're like, no, these are bad foods and I'm a good person and I don't eat them. If you can't answer yes to those questions, it doesn't matter how much you love training and how much you need it. You're just not addicted, right? Is Elon Musk addicted to work? Probably. But motherfucker's life looks pretty well sorted. I'd like to try to tell him, oh, you're an addict. You need like rehab. Rehab for what? Being a billionaire? Right? So it's totally cool to have habits and totally cool for them to help you run your life by being automatic. You just have to shit check them to make sure they're still logical. That's it.
I think brilliantly answered, and it sounds like you've actually thought that through somewhat. I don't know if you'd already had that planned out somewhere, but that was a really good answer.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's just stuff you think about all the time. And I'm, one of my hobbies, because I have no friends, is, like things like philosophy and psychology and stuff. I studied quite a bit of psychology back in university, and I always keep reading about it. And I do a lot of introspection and meditation and stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff you can figure out, like you think about it and just in your sort of day-to-day life. It comes up all the time. Like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Does this align with my goals? It's not that hard. You just got to take a little bit of personal honesty. And some shit, just doesn't make any sense and you're still doing it. And then you got to pay the piper. You got to sort of answer to yourself, like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I've had that with exercises. You ever had that with exercises, Steve? Where like people said I need to be doing this, or like you started exercise and you're like, I'm going to follow through. It's hurting your joints. It sucks. There's 3 better exercises. But you're like, no, I got to do this. What the fuck are you doing? Stop. And then you stop and you do better shit. And you're like, this is way better. I'll do that with weights. I'll do like lateral raises for 15 reps and I get this gnarly shoulder pump. Everything feels great. And I try it for like 8 and then everything hurts. And I'm like, no, I got to do it. And I'm like, is this logical? Like, no, nothing about it. I don't need to do it for 8. Volume all sums up anyway. And like, why am I doing this? Because of ego. Plain and simple, because I want to use the 45s. Like, man, is that a good enough reason for me in an alternate universe? Like, if alternate universe me saw me training, would he make fun of me? Yes, he'd make fun of me. That's the stupidest thing you'd ever do. well, I better stop doing it. And then you stop doing it. It requires a lot of self-honesty, but the shit pays off because then you don't do dumb shit all the time.
No, I can completely relate to that. I'm sure the audience can. And actually, as a side interest, is there any weird neurotic habits you got into in any of your preps that you were like, I don't know, that you can share? Is there anything you did?
You fucking kidding me? One of the side effects of trenbolone acetate is to literally make you clinically neurotic. You start having neurotic thoughts. You start having psychotic thoughts. God damn, dude. Real nasty shit.
Right, okay.
Fantasizing about cheat foods, going into cycles of I can't have them. It's just this real moralistic kind of stuff. I can't have them, but I really want them. Maybe I can squeeze them in. Like macros and IFYM just doesn't work at that point because you're just going to try to eat everything with junk food. Mm-hmm. Trying to justify high carb days and then trying to commit to lower carb days, and you start getting flatter and you're like, justify to yourself, no, I need to fill out, so I need to eat more carbs today. You really know in the back of your head that you're just being a piece of shit and you're just hungry, but your brain doesn't work so well, so you're like, just lie to yourself all the time. Real gnarly shit. And prep is, sports supplements or no sports supplements. Prep's a nasty time to basically, like, you don't have the psychological faculties or the willpower to really give things a lot of thought. So like the gentleman who asked this question said, you sort of start coasting on habits and you don't sometimes analyze when they become neurotic or not. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. Body weight stuff. Like, so I take my weight and I try to calculate like what possible offsets could result in this weight. Like, okay, but I didn't eat as many carbs yesterday. Ooh, but I had a bigger pump. Ooh, but I trained with high volume, so that's going to be intramuscular bloating. And I try to just like think through all the stuff about like, why is my weight exactly what it is? And the real answer is shut the fuck up, just get your weight, write it down, and over 3 weeks and stuff, you've lost fat. It works, right? But you get really focused on details you're not supposed to, stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, I can completely relate, and I think a lot of the things you said there, either on trend or not, as a natural, you still go through all of those thoughts, which are definitely not helpful.
Well, I mean, I've dieted as a natural a bunch, and as a natural, you wake up every day in your diet, and you're like, okay, you do every set you do, every time you flex, you're like, am I losing muscle? Am I losing muscle? Am I losing muscle? Am I losing muscle? This is it. I'm losing muscle. I'm losing strength. It's just days for me to become skinny again. I knew it. Like, I just don't have the genetics for this. Like, there's no way out. Typical like day of natural prep. So.
And I know for some of these neurotic habits, for me at least, it was just time to, like, in prep they were kind of useful, and it was just outside of prep they weren't, but it just took me time. Like, I can remember Charlotte being like, oh, you don't eat your like weird oat concoction before bed and eat like it in the corner and in this specific way with your specific spoon. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't anymore. When did I stop doing that?
That's good. That's good to grow out of them. Some people just have to, it's good that you just sort of drifted away. Some people don't drift away and they have to talk themselves away from it.
Yeah, it's the hard part. And that's why I think a lot of the time competing year to year for those people that haven't been competing a long time, it just doesn't make sense for them.
You definitely need to decompress. Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. So he has another part to this question, or actually it's a different question. He said, in terms of kind of trying to find what is quote unquote optimal for you in terms of nutrition, how would one go about identifying that? Is there any kind of systematically ways we can perform experiments to try and find what really works for them? Any meaningful data?
First, start with as many of the basics that work as you can. And then make sure that whatever outcome variables you're measuring can be measured on the time scales you want. Some variables can be measured on relatively short time scales. For example, you're trying to figure out what portion of your carbohydrates pre-workout versus much later in the day is optimal for energy levels in your workout versus making you too bloated or versus not giving you enough energy and making you hungry. That's something you can tweak every day for 2 weeks and then finally find values that are reasonable. You also have to understand that every optimality, because of the stochastic nature of the human body, is just a range. And some days you feel better, some days worse, but I'm never going to tell you like, okay, like 95 grams of carbs is my pre-workout. It's not 96. It sure as hell isn't 97. That's crazy talk. Sometimes it's 94, but only on Tuesdays. Like, it's nuts. Be like, what do you do with your pre-workout? And I'd be like, like 80 to 100 grams of carbs usually. And it'd be like, what's the difference between 80 and 100? I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind? I don't know. I can't even tell, like, a plate 80 versus 100. I can't even, like, see what the difference is there. So, but I know it's probably not 50. It is probably not 150, So one of them is just setting reasonable limits on what optimality looks like. And then, what are your outcome variables? If your outcome variable is daily energy or workout energy, you can measure that after every workout and be like, hey, I ate this many carbs and they'll work like that. And make sure you make meaningful changes too. So for example, let's say you're used to eating 50 grams of carbs 2 hours before your workout, and you think, is more carbs going to help me? Go to 75 for a couple of days and see how you feel, and really give it a good run, not just one day, because it could just be error, right? So 75 for a couple of days, and you're like, wow, these last couple of days really I just performed better. My digestion was fine, everything was great. 75 beats 50. That's it. And if you're not sure, go back to 50 for 3 days, and you're like, man, that definitely sucked. Fuck 50. Back to 75, then you're great. And then go to 100 and see if 100 works, right? And don't just people are like, yeah, I've experimented with higher carbs. Like, what do you mean? Like, I used to eat 50 grams and now I eat 55. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You don't know. There's nothing you learned from that. So one of those is, making meaningful changes that are sizable and then tracking the results. As far as nutrition, another one is, man, the tough thing about nutrition is like energy levels are easy to measure. The degree of fullness you have in your workouts and stuff like that is easy to measure. The rapidity of weight loss is relatively easy to measure. The results on muscle gain are really hard to measure because that shit takes a long time. Results on fat loss are tough to measure, but sort of like, on the scale of weeks and months, you can tell if your protocol is resulting in more fat or less fat. And then muscle gain, it's really the big picture, big swaths. I will tell you, though, that I'm not a huge fan of, well, let me put this more scientifically. There's a range of alterations you can make to your diet with which you have no reasonable instruments to detect the precision of the change. For example, people will say, okay, do you prefer to eat mostly peanut butter for your fats or mostly almond butter? And which one's better for muscle growth? What the fuck are you going to measure that? That's 2 tablespoons a day. It's the same macros. So automatically you just go to the RP diet book and you're like, hey, that is like maybe 0.5% of total difference on your muscle growth. Let's see exactly what that means. That's 0.5% of the difference in muscle growth. Let's say you put 4 kilos on of muscle in 6 months. Pretty good, right? What the fuck's 0.5% of 4 kilos? Oh my God. But there's not an MRI machine that can detect that level of muscle. So some things, people will say like, yeah, I really prefer like almonds versus, olive oil. And I'm like, hey, sweet, that's news to me. Like must be like, then again, you need more acute variables like digestion. Like you just don't like almonds. They make you feel a little weird. Man, that's totally cool. Just do what you like. But, as long as you're doing the basics, man, a lot of nutritional precision is just wasted analysis time. You could just be analyzing shit that actually matters. Like people would literally ask me like, there's these funny Instagram questions you never think of, like, do you prefer oats or rice, Dr. Mike? I'm like, what? They go in the mouth and they come out of your ass, hopefully somewhat digested, and you get pumps and that's it. Like, I don't fucking know. Like maybe I just don't have a sensitive stomach. There's like 800 different kinds of carbs I could eat and it's all the fucking same. Now, if they're meaningfully different in glycemic indexes, like that's something, right? Like, do you prefer to drink Gatorade 2 hours before you work out or eat white rice? Like, well, the white rice is going to stick with me a little longer. It's not going to make me super hungry. I don't get rebound hypoglycemics. These are defensible, easily detectable reasons. But I think some people are like, yeah, man, I switched from tilapia to fucking red meat. And I noticed, like, you didn't know a shit. Shut the fuck up. Like, make believe in your own head. Now, if you're a contest bodybuilder and your physique changes day to day, and you do a week of tilapia and you look at your physique, a week of steak and you look at your physique, if you've isolated the macros to be identical, you might be able to make some conclusions, especially with like the food carries like a bunch of like immune factors, a bunch of sort of like hormonal factors that might have differences, not in long-term muscle gain or fat loss, but in just how much water you carry, right? So like you might eat some meat and your gut bacteria flips you the middle finger and you're carrying more water and your gut looks distended. And then you might eat some fish and your gut bacteria is like jamming and everything looks great and you feel great. That doesn't mean that you're gaining more or less muscle or whatever. But it just means you're, like pre-contest, like in the week before, you probably want to stay away from steak, right? And that's the kind of, again, acute measures where people like, I just don't want people asking the questions that lead nowhere because the ability to measure is impossible and the theoretical differences are pretty much null. Like, what gains you more muscle, tilapia or steak? Like, how the fuck are you going to find that? You're not going to find that out. That's when you get, looking at research studies starts to be a little bit more valuable when you see like, in some kind of magical world, a meta-analysis on tilapia versus steak consumption on studies where there are hundreds of participants in metabolic wards. And they measure acute variables and say, look, tilapia just straight up boosts your testosterone more. It causes less of a glycemic response. It's less allergenic. And it's better for muscle growth for most people. And then you'll never be able to feel any of this or detect it in yourself, but you'll take it anyway. It's like we take multivitamins. You can't tell when you're on a multivitamin or not, but it works. So that's how you tell that. You just make sure to sort of, stick with basic science, measure what you can, and understand that a lot of stuff you won't be able to measure, but you don't have to. Because listen, here's the thing. If you eat like, 2 grams per kilo of protein, eat enough carbs to get you your workouts you need, and eat like at least a minimum amount of fat, mostly from healthy sources, timed in a way that doesn't make you sick and lets you eat your food, you are doing 95% of everything you're going to be to gain muscle. And then the question of like, well, I want to optimize even more is almost like really? You have more important things to think about. Like, think about how to optimize your consistency. Think about how to optimize your health so you're not sick as often versus like, you're talking about different foods. This is maybe just me getting a little ranty, but like, I honestly there's like, I don't know if it's a growing thing or it's always been around. The obsession with specific foods is just really fucking pissed. God, Dr. Mike, what do you think about avocados? I'm like, what? I don't think about them at all. I think they're great. They taste great. They're in a huge category of healthy fats. And they're like, what about versus olive oil? I'm like, yo, is there some kind of celebrity death match of healthy fats that I missed somewhere? Like in the red corner, avocado from Brazil. You're like, in those leg locks, careful. And olive oil is like, right? It's Italian or whatever. It's just fucking nonsense. Like there's hundreds of healthy foods or bodybuilding effective foods that are all damn near the same on your physique and your health. The next question is, do you like how they taste, or do they make your tummy feel weird and upset? And if the answer is then variation. And this is, again, a huge thing people miss with optimality is variation is a part of eating. You'd be like, what's better, steak or tilapia? Like, if I tell you steak, will you never eat anything but steak again? And if the answer is yes, you fucked up, because then you're doing yourself a disservice for nutrient diversity and everything.
Yeah, I think just a brilliant answer all round in that people... I think just the point there in terms of being able to measure what you actually is realistically able to, because I think people come out with theoretical arguments and things for this food over this food, this timing over this timing, or whatever it might be, and it's too minute to actually be anything that they could ever have good evidence for. So I thought that was really well put.
Totally. And if it's that hard to measure, then it matters that little.
Yeah. Fantastic. We have time for one more question, Mike.
Yeah, easily.
Cool. So the last question is from Patrick James Barney, and he has asked, and it might be, it's kind of a related question, I guess. He said, ingesting 75 to 85% of your carbohydrate intake peri-workout in an attempt to take advantage of the increased sensitivity to insulin, will doing this over the long term provide any meaningful benefits to body composition?
Yeah. 75 to 80% is kind of a lot. I'd say more like 60. But yeah, I think it will. Cody Hahn actually just posted a recent study showing that not only are muscle cells more sensitive to glucose in the several hours after training, but fat cells are less sensitive, which is, something that I've been personally preaching for 5 years or some shit like that. This is the thing is, it's not a big difference. It's a small difference, but over the long time, it helps. So like, Do I get really pissed when people just eat all of their carbs evenly spread throughout the day? No, I think they're doing mostly everything correctly. If they cluster their carbs just a little bit more around the workout window, are they going to have benefits? Yeah, probably really small benefits, but that over time are going to give them that extra little bit. If I see someone eating, any carbs 2 meals after the workouts and not eating 150 grams of carbs per meal right after the workout, am I like, wow, that's a smart man. He's optimizing. Like, no, you're just like, needlessly like ruining your life for something that you're already filling in. There's remember, like insulin sensitivity is only slightly enhanced, so on and so forth. That means you need only slightly amount of carbohydrates greater, not like, 200 grams in one meal and then 0 in the next to take advantage of the window. So yeah, it absolutely is a thing. But again, it's one of those things that's going to take you months and months and years to see the difference. And because there's no alternate universe you that didn't do that, you won't even see that. You won't even know what the difference is. Mm-hmm. But based on good theoretical concerns and good studies, that it's probably one of those things you should do. It's one of those things like, should you eat a whole lot of like, sausage and bacon and all these other cured meats to reduce your risk or to increase your risk of colon cancer or something like that, or like stomach cancer? Like, yeah, you should probably just, not eat those all the fucking time. And someone could say like, well, I've been eating them for years and still nothing yet. Like, well, no shit. Like you could live till 90 and never get any kind of cancer, just luck of the draw. You're like, so how do I know if it's working for my body? Because your body's damn near the same as everyone else's. And all the research on the huge meta-analyses and RCTs say that this is how it is. So some things you have to take on scientific inference, and you will never be able to detect them in your own body. Like, can I tell you that like I feel different with good nutrient timing versus okay nutrient timing? No, I feel the fucking same. But over time, is it making me more jacked? Yeah, probably, just by a little bit. And I like to do things that are proper and effective.
Yeah, really well put. And I think it's like all those, the things at the higher end of the pyramid, the kind of the small individualization, the supplementation, the nutrient timing things. I think you're completely right in that we kind of know theoretically what be a good idea, but we're never going to realistically be able to exactly know that that's having that result we want in the short term. For our body, especially. Yeah. So I got time for another one if you want. Cool. We have one from, I know he's one of your favorites, Ido de Gaulle. Did I say his name right? I don't speak to these people. I don't know. It's Ido probably. Ido de Gaulle. He's actually orcish. Do you know what an orc? Yeah, he's an orc lord. Go check him out at RP Plus, guys. He's one of the characters over there. That's right. He has asked Mike's thought, and I don't think he's asked this over on RP Plus. Mike's thoughts on exercise selection when massing versus cutting. Any considerations to have, i.e., the novel effect, saving more fatiguing exercises for massing, so on and so forth. So you're going to be doing more isolation work when you're massing, not because there's something special about isolation work, but because you're going to be more likely doing priority routines. So and massing is the time to make improvements. So you might have very asymmetrical routines that really train your chest a lot, but not your arms as much. And if you just train your chest, you might be able to do incline dumbbell press, flat bench press, and dips, zero isolation, and get enough good chest work to hold your size. That might be something you do in a cutting phase. But in a massing phase, you might add in some chest flies because you really want to put more emphasis on growing the chest. And, after enough compounds, like you really just need to really more focus on the chest. So a lot of times when I see someone doing a lot of isolations, I sort of assume like, okay, they're probably trying to improve a body part. So I don't assume that they're massing, but I assume that they should be massing because if you're trying to improve a body part, you should be playing outside. Another thing is, I think that some exercises with a lot of axial fatigue, axial loading, and systemic fatigue are really only survivable and sustainable on a mass gaining phase. So maybe that's the time to do them. But again, it really has to come from a needs analysis. It's not like you're like mass gain, time for huge, like systemically fatiguing exercises. It's like mass gain, let's assess our needs. And because we have a little bit more juice to push in, we could select exercises that normally would just be sort of not the greatest use. So an example there is like rack pulls. Like if you do rack pulls to try to bring up your back, they're really fatiguing, but they really fuck the erectors up, which is cool. So if you decided that rack pulls are good for your back during a mass phase, you could definitely put them in. During a cutting phase, if you had rack pulls and I watched you do them during cutting, first question to ask you would be like,
So all that systemic fatigue, is it worth the trade-off of the lower rate of motion and the lower hypertrophic effect for the rest of your body, right? Because for the rest of your body, like, you could train your legs a lot less on a mass and not lose any leg size. You could train your back a lot more and it'll push your back into the stratosphere. On a cut, if you train your back more, you exceed its MRV. So you can't do that. If you train your legs way less, you get below its MV and then you lose leg size. So it's one of those things that you're not going to be seeing shortened range of motion, very isolation and very targeted exercises as much, and very fatiguing variety of those as much on a cut as you will on a mass. Because the purpose of a cut is to give all of your muscles due justice with exercises that are, very stimulatory and perhaps a little bit less fatiguing, the stimulus to fatigue ratio than they would otherwise be. Something that will, I'd like to just throw this concept out now. This is I think the first time I've talked about this concept in public, so to speak. It's going to be a pretty big discussion point in a Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy book, which, by the way, has already been spread into multiple outlines and going to start writing in a couple weeks. It's a very, very, very important concept. And as soon as I say it, you'll be like, duh. You can apply this to a program, but you can especially apply it to any exercise. The stimulus to fatigue ratio, critical. So, for example, for the quadriceps, what is the amount of fatigue that we get, or the amount of stimulus that we get from sumo stance half rep squats for the quads? The stimulus is like, okay, not great. What's the fatigue? Fucking massive. So the ratio sucks. What about deep, high bar with weightlifting shoes, squats with a relatively close stance and a pause at the bottom? The fatigue, decent. The stimulus, massive. So the stimulus to fatigue ratio is higher, which, if you think about it, the stimulus to fatigue ratio is super important because, that is how you get the most gains, because the stimulus to fatigue ratio isn't just saying this exercise is better for muscle growth. It's saying something much cooler than that. It's saying, here's your MRV, and this exercise is better for muscle growth if we stick it here. But because we stick it here and it's got a low fatigue, it's actually looks like this. So we can do time and a half more of that shit, and you get that much more growth. So it's the stimulus to fatigue ratio is super, super big concept, and it can be applied to exercises individually, especially for an individual person. One of these things is a little broy, but it has merit to it. How does an exercise make you feel? How big of a hit does it give you? How big of a pump does it give you? And how much delayed onset muscle soreness can it produce with a certain volume? Meanwhile, your perception of effort isn't so high, right? Because perception of effort really ends up being like fatigue, or how much it fatigues you. So you're like, okay, is this a good exercise for me to include in my plan? Does it get me a good pump? Does it get me sore if I do, let's say, too much of it? Does it get me good DOMs? Like, it means it's actually hitting what I want it to hit. And how fatiguing is it relative to other exercises? If you pick me an exercise which doesn't give you a good pump, you have to do 10 sets to get sore at all, and it's fatiguing as shit, that's a fucking garbage exercise. And some people, for bent rows, that's how they feel. But for cable rows, they feel the other way. I'm the other way around. For cable rows, I just do them forever, and I'm like, fuck, this is stupid. But for bent rows, I do 4 sets, and I'm like, this is amazing, right? So, and then some exercise, like people ask all the time, what's better, compound heavy basics or isolations? Well, compound heavy basics have a great stimulus, but they a lot of fatigue. So the stimulus to fatigue ratio might be here. Isolation exercises have a shitty stimulus, but also really low fatigue. So they might actually have about the same ratio. So it's a lot of times not really a question between isolation and compound. It is, how are you doing your compounds? Range of motion. Now, here's one. Range of motion almost always causes a greater stimulus to fatigue ratio. If you start cutting your reps short, you're going to get crazy fatigue because you have to use that much more weight. But your stimulus is going to be not so great. Mind-muscle connection, right? An instant boost to stimulus to fatigue ratios. Finding exercises that fit you. Proper technique, right? All that stuff. Like, if you do squats and you lean over a ton and use your back, the stimulus to fatigue ratio for your quads fucking sucks. But if you stay upright and really sink into your quads, use control, mind-muscle connection, and so forth, the stimulus goes up, the fatigue goes down, and you got a fucking golden-ass exercise. So it's a huge, huge concept. It's an objective concept that you can apply to every exercise you use, And especially comparing two exercises. Like, hey, should I use this exercise or that exercise? Like, well, what's their stimulus to fatigue ratios for you? And if you're like, well, clearly, like if I'm like, okay, if you do 5 sets of assisted pull-ups versus 5 sets of this weird pull-down machine that your gym just got, which one stimulates you more? Like, assisted pull-ups for sure. Like, which one fatigues you more? Like, that weird machine, it kind of fucks my shoulders up, and I don't know, I just feel tired. I feel like handles are too big. Like, okay, so which one are you going to do? Like, assisted pull-ups, right? Because it just plain old wins, right? And a bunch of exercises are tied on stimulus to fatigue ratio, or at least they have a very high one. Those like top 3 or 4 are the ones you're going to use all the time in your program. Like, variation's cool. You can use squats, you can do leg press, you can do hack squats, you can do lunges. No one is going to recommend that you do partial sumo stance squats for your quads, because that on stimulus to fatigue ratio just rules itself out. So this is a kind of a neat concept that sort of allows us to objectively analyze, like, okay, is this a good idea? Is my technique good? So on and so forth. And people say like, oh man, I improved my technique on an exercise and allowed me to get more out of it. What they really mean is the stimulus to fatigue ratio improved. And if it didn't, I don't know what they mean by get more out of it.
No, brilliant. I think I've heard you. Oh, I can hear myself back. It's all right. It's not too bad.
It's trippy, isn't
it? I sound like I'm shouting at you. I really like that concept. And I think you may have spoken about it before. At least I, in my head, have heard somewhere that you've said it, because I'm pretty sure I used it even for an infographic on deadlifts and how that kind of the ratio shifted as you got more advanced and stronger with deadlifts.
For sure. And that it's related to the axial loading concept, because axial loading really fucks that fatigue up big time. But sometimes the stimulus is worth it. Like for beginners, they don't really care how much fatigue they sum up, because their MRV is so high relative to what how much their work capacity is. They just can't do that much damage. So then it makes sense, because you get the total magnitude of stimulus from deadlifts is fucking crazy high if you can tolerate the fatigue. Like, it'd be funny if a beginner was like, yeah, I don't do deadlifts because they tire me out too much. Like, tire out for what, you little bitch? You're pulling 60 kilos. You could do like 80 sets of that and be just fine, right? But when you're super fatigue constrained, when your MRV is tight, filled with all this other shit, and you're at the very end of your genetic limits, yeah, you don't just throw deadlifts in there and fuck the whole thing up. So I think I've used it in that context, but I've never really expanded upon it in a very general context of like, look, this applies to all exercises. And that's how you really find out if you're doing the right thing in the gym.
And that's something I've seen you and Jared particularly practice. It kind of something that rings true to me is kind of getting more out of less in the way you control your exercises, where you don't jerk anything, where often with your squats, you do pause them in the bottom, you control that. I mean, that's something I changed with my squats recently, and it made a huge, like that ratio completely shifted in the favor of muscle growth. I'm getting more quad soreness than I would ever have got beforehand, and I'm not getting the hip issues that I was getting when I was really kind of using that stretch reflex out of the bottom, which I think some people can get away with, but it just wasn't working for me.
That is exactly how you're supposed to be using that, 100%. And it's tempting to do the hardcore exercises. It's tempting to shorten range of motion. It's tempting to use more weight. But you gotta come back every now and again to like, am I stimulating, and at what expense of fatigue is this coming? And a lot of times when we look at the goofy ways in which pro bodybuilders train, stimulus to fatigue ratio can explain some of that. Like, why is that guy doing cable flies and not dumbbell flies? Because if you do dumbbell flies with like 80-pound dumbbells, it just fucks you up. The injury risk is really high. Total fatigue, the muscle damage might be too high. But with flies and cables, it might just be the right way to get the most juice out of that exercise for that person. And they there's a lot of pro bodybuilders say like, I really love this exercise. I really feel it where I'm supposed to. Like, that's a big deal. And of course, guy who just got his, cert last year is looking at him. He's like, he's doing that wrong. Like, that's nice. He might just be doing it wrong. And you could teach him how to do it right and it'd be better. But I'll tell you like a real quick story. I have like this patented this stock workout that I did that I put people through. If they ever ask me, like, if they tell me like they're struggling with quad development and they're like, squatting a lot and deadlifting a lot and leg pressing a lot, and they're just like, they can't feel my quads, or like, I don't know, like I've never overtrained my quads. I don't think it's possible. I do this workout where the average ends up being is 10 total sets. And what it is I teach them to leg press properly, and which means full range of motion and, heels on the pad at all times, chest up and everything like that, low position, feet closer together. I teach them to leg press like that. And then we do 6 working sets of leg presses in the 10 to 20 rep range. And after this, like they're like violently shaking their quads. And they're like, what the fuck is going on? And then 4 sets of high bar squats in the 10 to 12 rep range, paused. And a lot of times these are strong dudes who used to squat 150 kilos for reps. They're actually doing it with 60 kilos because they're mush. And they get DOMs, and I don't advocate training like a sustainably. They get DOMs for like 6 days. And I'm like, so do you still think your quads are an issue? And they're like, dude, what the fuck? How did you do that? And I'm like, well, here's the thing, man. You've been training wrong your whole fucking life. Like, no one's ever taught you how to leg press properly. You know, you've seen all those videos of strong guys like doing these little bullshit half reps and putting their feet really wide. Like, as soon as a guy puts his feet wide on a leg press, I'm like, here we go. Like, I remember one guy, man, I was training at a gym in California, and I was like, 240 at the time, relatively lean. And I had finished leg pressing with like 4.5 plates on a side, properly. And this guy was waiting for the leg press, and he was like 1/2 my size. And as soon as I was done, he put more weight on the leg press and did more reps than I did in leg press. And I just wondered, I told Jen Case at the time, her and I were hanging out, I was like, I wonder if that guy thought for even a moment, like, why did that guy's legs look like that and I'm stronger than him? Or did he like pat himself on the back like, that guy's a pussy, all that muscle?
I reckon he did.
Because I remember seeing a guy like that once. It was an Olympic weightlifter, and this is when I was 19 years old. I was half squatting all the time, so just didn't know any better. I saw a guy use 60 kilos and do an Olympic squat with it. And I remember his triceps were big and his quads were huge. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck is that? I was like, how are these big legs doing such little weights? And he sunk it like into the floor. Like from next day on, I was like, I'm going deep. As soon as I started doing that, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this whole other world of misery and benefits exists. So it's one of those things where like anytime you do an exercise, you can sort of shit test yourself and say, okay, am I stimulating? And is the fatigue reasonable? Is the fatigue worth the stimulus? Because if the fatigue is just being added to lift more weight, but you don't feel it in your muscles, then I don't know. It's probably not worth it.
I think we've all got that guy in our gym. I've certainly got one in my gym who he just puts on all the plates on the leg press. Every plate that can go on there, he just puts it all on there.
And to me, it's always like I'm too lazy to do that. Like, thank God I only leg press like 5 plates because I don't want to drag 8 plates out. Like, I trained with Charlie, and he has to do like 6.5 plates, and he's like, I got to put all these plates on. But that's full range of motion for sets of 10 and 12. It just is 800-pound squatter. It's just what it takes. And there's guys. Oh my God, there's a girl at our gym who probably weighs 60 kilos. She's not jacked, by the way. And she leg presses basically what I do. And her and I like would trade sets before. And I don't know if it ever occurred to her. She'd probably just like, wow, I'm really strong. Like that's the only thing she thought.
And you brought up another concept there, I guess, that might play into the stimulus to fatigue ratio in terms of like the leg pressing before the squatting. Kind of an interesting way to try and maybe get that in your favor again as you're more advanced.
Totally, because as you're more advanced, the fatigue comes at more and more of a cost. And, the stimulus to fatigue ratio of the squat could always be really high, but you don't care so much because you don't pay a big price on that fatigue because your MRV is fucking massive and you're just not that strong. When your fatigue starts to be a real concern, you have to shift the stimulus to fatigue ratio to a lower stimulus in absolute terms, but in relative terms, a way better stimulus to fatigue ratio. So you end up leg pressing before you squat. Now, if you squatted first and leg press second, the total magnitude of the disruption would be higher. So if you can still pay the fatigue cost of that, do it because it's probably better. But if you leg press before squatting, the stimulus to fatigue ratio is probably a little better, so you can do more of both to get more growth, especially if you're really fatigue limited. Like when people ask, like, am I fatigue limited? If you have to ask, you're probably not, right? Like I don't know. Like people say, like, why do you leg press before you squat? And then here's a funny one. People ask me this all the time. Dr. Mike, why do your reps go down from set to set on leg presses? Because I get tired, motherfucker. Don't you people get tired? And they're like, I never get tired. I'm like, well, that just means you're too small. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Just you will know at some point when you can't just do sets of 10 anymore, the real intra-workout fatigue looks like. And they think, some people think it's like a predetermined rep scheme. They're like, why do you drop by exactly 2 reps? I'm like, because that's just about how many reps I know I'm not going to be able to get on the next set. So it's one of those things, like if you watch all these lectures and you read all the shit you and I put out, axial loading, you're like, what the fuck is that? You read about it and you're like, I don't get it. It's not that I don't get it. I can't relate to it. Great.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But if you read it and it's been happening to you, you're like, oh, that's what that is. Fuck. Then you want more of these tips.
Cool. I think we'll call it there, if that's all right, Mike. And I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. People absolutely love these episodes, especially the Q&As. So I'm glad we can get at least another one done before we hit 2019, which I can't believe it's already coming along. But yeah, thank you again, Mike. And I'm sure everyone would like to thank you as well.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me on. It is an honor every single time.
Cheers, guys, and take care.